Hey there. Tonight, we're traveling back to one of the darkest chapters in American history, Salem, Massachusetts. The snow is falling outside your warm, safe home, but we're about to venture into a world where paranoia ruled, where neighbors turned against neighbors, and where a simple accusation could mean death. Before we begin this journey through time, let me know in the comments below, where are you watching from? What time is it in your part of the world? I love hearing from our back time family across the globe. Whether you're settling in for the night in New York, having your morning coffee in London, or taking an afternoon break in Sydney, we're all connected by our fascination with the forgotten corners of history. So dim the lights, pull up those blankets, and get comfortable. Tonight, you're not just learning about the Salem witch trials, you're living them. You'll walk through the frozen mud of Salem Village, feel the weight of suspicion on your shoulders, and understand why survival in 1692 required more than just avoiding accusations of witchcraft. You'll discover the brutal daily realities they never taught you in school, the bone-chilling cold of unheated homes, the constant fear of starvation, the back-breaking labor required just to see another sunrise. This isn't just history, it's a survival guide to one of humanity's most terrifying periods. Your name is Thomas Whitmore, and you wake before dawn on this bitter February morning in Salem Village. The frost on your single-pane window is thick as parchment, and your breath forms clouds in the frigid air of your one-room cabin. Your straw-filled mattress offers little comfort against the wooden floor, and your woolen blanket, though precious, barely keeps the bone-deep cold at bay. The fire in your stone hearth died hours ago, leaving only gray ashes. You know that rekindling it will consume precious firewood, wood you'll need to chop from the frozen forest if you want warmth tonight. Your joints ache from yesterday's labor, splitting logs until your hands bled through your leather gloves. Outside, the wind howls through the bare oak trees, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else. It's been 3 weeks since young Betty Paris and her cousin Abigail began their strange fits, and whispers of witchcraft have begun spreading through the village like plague. Your stomach growls painfully. Yesterday's meal was a thin porridge of cornmeal and water, flavored with a precious pinch of salt. The root cellar beneath your cabin holds only enough turnips and dried corn to last another month, maybe less if the spring comes late. The harsh winter has already claimed 2 families in the village. The Hartwell infant froze to death despite his mother's desperate attempts to keep him warm, and old Samuel Brooks was found rigid in his bed 3 mornings ago. You stretch your cramped limbs and steel yourself for another day of survival. In Salem Village, each dawn brings new challenges. Finding food, staying warm, avoiding the growing paranoia that seems to infect more neighbors each day. The simple act of living through winter in 1692 requires more courage than most people possess. You fumble for your flint and steel in the growing dawn light, your fingers numb despite sleeping with your hands tucked beneath your arms. The metal tools feel like ice against your skin. It takes 7 strikes before a spark catches in the charred cloth tinder, and even then, coaxing it into flame requires precious dried pine needles you've hoarded since autumn. The small fire crackles to life, casting dancing shadows on your cabin's rough-hewn walls. You hold your hands close to the flames, feeling the sting as circulation returns to your fingertips. This tiny fire will last perhaps 2 hours before demanding more fuel that requires venturing into the snow-covered forest where wolves have been spotted twice this winter. Your water bucket sits frozen solid beside the door. You'll need to break the ice with your axe handle and melt it over the fire before you can even consider breakfast. The nearest well is a quarter-mile walk through knee-deep snow, and yesterday's trip left you soaked and shivering for hours. As you tend the struggling fire, you hear it, the sound that makes your blood run cold. Shouting from the direction of Reverend Paris's house, followed by a woman's terrified scream. Through your frosted window, you glimpse figures running through the snow, their dark shapes stark against the white landscape. Something has happened, something terrible. You know you should investigate, help if possible, but a deeper instinct warns against it. In Salem Village, being present when trouble occurs often means being blamed for it. The accusations of witchcraft that began with the Paris children are spreading like wildfire, and yesterday Goodwife Bishop whispered that she'd seen strange lights near your cabin. Your hand trembles as you add another precious log to the fire, knowing that this morning's disturbance will change everything. The shouting grows louder, and through your window, you watch as Goodwife Proctor stumbles through the snow toward Reverend Paris's house, her woolen cloak billowing behind her. Her bonnet has fallen back, exposing gray hair wild with sleep and terror. Behind her, two more figures emerge from nearby cabins. Thomas Putnam and his wife Anne, both moving with the urgent haste of people responding to catastrophe. You press your face against the icy glass, trying to understand what's happening. The screaming has stopped, replaced by urgent voices and the sound of a horse being saddled. Someone is preparing to ride hard, probably to Salem town for the physician or magistrate. Your stomach churns with more than hunger now. You've lived in Salem Village long enough to recognize the signs of brewing trouble. First came the whispers about the Paris girl's strange behavior, the fits, the nonsensical words, the contortions that defied natural explanation. Then the hushed conversations after Sunday service, neighbors eyeing each other with new suspicion. You remember last week's encounter with Goody Osborne at the village well. She'd looked at you strangely when you mentioned your cow had stopped giving milk, and later that same day, young Mercy Williams claimed to have seen a dark figure near your property. Coincidences, surely, but in Salem Village, coincidences can become accusations, and accusations can become death sentences. Your fire pops loudly, making you jump. Outside, you hear the thunder of hooves as someone rides toward Salem town. The morning that began with simple survival concerns, finding food, staying warm, preserving firewood, has suddenly become infinitely more dangerous. You move away from the window and check that your wooden door is securely barred. In Salem Village 6092, sometimes the greatest threat isn't the cold or hunger, it's your neighbors. The horse and rider disappear into the gray morning, leaving behind an unsettling silence that feels heavier than the previous night's snowfall. You turn back to your meager fire and try to focus on the immediate tasks of survival. Your stomach cramps with hunger, reminding you that yesterday's thin gruel was your only meal. From your dwindling stores, you retrieve a handful of dried corn kernels and a small piece of salt pork, no larger than your thumb. The pork is your last piece of meat. Until spring, if spring brings successful. You place the corn in your single iron pot with melted snow water, adding the precious salt pork for flavor. While the corn softens over your small fire, you examine your remaining supplies with growing alarm. 3 turnips soft with age, a handful of dried beans, a small sack of cornmeal that might last 10 more days. The harsh winter has depleted resources faster than you anticipated, and spring planting is still months away. Your neighbor Goodman Fletcher froze to death 2 weeks ago when his firewood ran out. You'd found him 3 days later, seated at his cold hearth, staring at gray ashes. The memory makes you count your own logs, enough for perhaps 5 more days if you're careful. Outside, you hear voices returning from the direction of town. Their tones carry a mix of excitement and dread that makes your skin crawl. Whatever happened at the Paris house this morning has drawn official attention, and in Salem Village, official attention often means investigations, interrogations, and accusations. You stir your thin breakfast and try to push away the growing certainty that your simple struggle for winter survival is about to become something far more deadly. The corn porridge bubbles weakly in your pot, barely more substantial than water. A sharp rap on your door makes your blood freeze. 3 measured knocks, followed by a pause, then 3 more, the pattern used by the village constable. You set down your wooden spoon and approach the door cautiously, your bare feet silent on the cold plank floor. Thomas Whitmore. The voice belongs to George Herrick, Salem Village's constable. His tone carries official weight that transforms your simple breakfast into a meal you may never finish. "Aye," you reply, your voice hoarser than you intended. "By order of the magistrates, you're summoned to witness at an examination this morning. The afflicted girls have made accusations, and all able-bodied men must attend." Your hand trembles as you lift the heavy wooden bar from your door. Constable Herrick stands in your doorway, his broad frame blocking out the gray morning light. His leather boots are caked with snow, and his breath forms thick clouds in the frigid air. Behind him you notice 2 other men, neighbors you recognize but who now regard you with careful measuring stares. Accusations against whom, you ask, though part of you already knows the answer will terrify you. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and the minister's slave Tits. They stand accused of afflicting the Paris and Williams children with witchcraft. Herrick's weathered face shows no emotion, but his eyes hold a warning. The examination begins within the hour. You'll attend or face charges yourself. You nod numbly, already reaching for your heavy woolen coat. Your thin breakfast sits abandoned by the fire, cooling rapidly in the morning air. The simple struggle for winter survival has just become a matter of life and death, but not in the way you expect. In Salem Village, 1692, staying alive means more than just finding food and staying warm. You pull on your heavy woolen coat, the fabric stiff with cold and age. Your hands shake as you lace your leather boots. Not from the cold, but from the implications of this summons. In the past month, you've heard whispers about examinations in other villages, and they never end well for anyone involved. Stepping outside, the bitter February air hits your face like a physical blow. The temperature must be near 0, and the wind carries ice crystals that sting your exposed skin. Your neighbors gather in small groups along the path to the meeting house, their faces grim beneath woolen caps and hoods. You recognize most of these people, farmers and craftsmen you've known for years. John Proctor walks beside his wife, Elizabeth, both of them silent and tense. Giles Corey stamps his feet to keep warm, his breath forming a constant cloud around his grizzled head. These are ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, and the fear in their eyes mirrors your own. The walk to the meeting house takes nearly 20 minutes through snow that reaches your knees in places. Your leather boots, already cracked from the harsh winter, let in moisture with every step. By the time you reach the wooden building, your feet are numb and your legs ache from the effort of walking through deep snow. Inside, the meeting house is packed with nearly every adult from Salem Village. The building's unheated interior provides little relief from the cold, and you can see your breath despite being sheltered from the wind. People press close together, partly for warmth but mostly because fear makes them seek comfort in number. At the front of the room, 3 chairs sit empty, waiting for the accused. Your stomach churns as you realize you're about to witness something that will change Salem Village forever. The great wooden doors creak open, and Constable Herrick enters with his prisoner. Sarah Good shuffles forward first, her appearance shocking even to those who know her reputation as the village beggar. Her gray hair hangs in matted tangles around her gaunt face, and her tattered dress barely provides modesty, let alone warmth. She's thin to the point of starvation, her sunken eyes darting nervously around the crowded room. Behind her walks Sarah Osborne, a woman you've seen at Sunday services but never spoken to. Unlike Good, Osborne maintains some dignity despite her circumstance. Her dark dress is worn but clean, and she holds her head high as she surveys the crowd. Her face shows defiance rather than fear, though you notice her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Last comes Tituba, Reverend Paris's slave from Barbados. Her dark skin makes her stand out starkly among the pale faces of Salem Village, and you can almost feel the tension increase as she enters. She wears a simple brown dress and white cap, her exotic appearance adding an element of otherness that makes the witchcraft accusations seem more plausible to many in the crowd. The three women are led to the chairs at the front of the meeting house. Behind them, the magistrates take their places. Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne, both men whose stern faces promise no mercy. Their black coats and white collars mark them as representatives of both civil and religious authority. You press closer to the wooden wall, trying to make yourself invisible while maintaining a clear view of the proceedings. Around you, neighbors whisper prayers or make signs against evil. The air grows thicker with each breath as more than 100 people crowd into the unheated building. Magistrate Hathorne rises from his chair, his black coat making him appear like a great bird of prey. His voice carries clearly through the packed meeting house as he addresses the first accused woman with calculated coldness. "Sarah Good, what evil spirit have you familiarity with?" "None." Good replies, her voice barely above a whisper. Her response triggers an immediate reaction from the front of the room where the afflicted girls sit. 9-year-old Betty Paris begins to writhe in her chair, letting out piercing screams that make your skin crawl. 11-year-old Abigail Williams joins her, both children contorting their bodies in ways that seem to defy natural movement. The sight of the children's fits fills the meeting house with gasps and praying. You've never witnessed anything like this. Their backs arch impossibly, their eyes roll back showing only whites, and they speak in voices that sound nothing like children. The effect on the crowd is immediate and terrifying. "Look how she torments them," Hathorne shouts over the screaming. "Sarah Good, do you not see what you have done? Why do you hurt these children?" Good's protest is lost in the chaos as more of the afflicted girls, Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, and Mary Walcott, begin their own terrible display. The temperature in the meeting house seems to drop another 10 degrees as fear grips every person present. You find yourself pressed against the wall, trying to understand what you're witnessing. Are these truly the supernatural manifestations of witchcraft, or something else entirely? The rational part of your mind searches for natural explanations, but the sheer terror of the moment makes logical thinking nearly impossible. Around you, neighbors who were ordinary farmers and craftsmen this morning now stare with the wide eyes of people confronting the impossible. The afflicted girl's screaming reaches a crescendo that seems to shake the very timbers of the meeting house. You watch in horror as young Mary Warren suddenly points directly at Sarah Good and shrieks, There she stands upon the beam. Her finger trembles as she traces invisible movement across the ceiling. She's going to fall upon us. The entire crowd looks up at the rough-hewn wooden beams overhead, seeing nothing but shadows and morning light filtering through the small window. Yet the terror in Mary Warren's voice is so convincing that several people near you instinctively duck their heads and move away from where she points. Sarah Good's denial becomes more desperate. "I do not torment them," she pleads, her voice breaking. "It is the devil's work, but not mine." Her words only seem to inflame the situation further. The afflicted girls now claim to see Sarah Good's specter moving among the crowd, pinching and tormenting invisible victims. Magistrate Corwin leans forward in his chair. "If you are not the one afflicting them, then who is?" he demands. "It is Sarah Osborne," Good suddenly declares, pointing at the woman beside her. "She made me do it." The accusation sends another wave of panic through the meeting house. You realize with growing dread that this examination isn't seeking truth, it's creating more accusation. Each denial leads to new claims, each protest generates fresh suspicion. Your own breathing becomes shallow as you consider the implications. If Sarah Good, despite her reputation as a beggar and outcast, can be accused of impossible crimes based solely on the word of children and fits, then anyone in Salem Village could be next.
The warmth from the crowd of bodies does nothing to combat the chill that settles deep in your bones. Sarah Osborne now faces the magistrate's interrogation, and you can see the difference immediately. Unlike Sarah Good's cowering desperation, Osborne meets Hathorne's gaze directly. Her voice carries strength despite her circumstances. I am innocent, she declares firmly. I have never made any covenant with the devil. I have done nothing but good in this community. Her words ring with conviction, but the afflicted girls respond as violently as before. Betty Paris begins choking, gasping for air as if invisible hands grip her throat.
What disturbs you most is watching your neighbors' faces, people you've known for years. Thomas Putnam, Samuel Paris, even gentle Rebecca Nurse. Stare at the accused women with expressions you've never seen before. Fear has transformed them into something else, something harder and more dangerous. The examination continues for what feels like hours. Your feet grow numb from standing on the cold wooden floor, and the lack of food since yesterday's meager supper makes you lightheaded. Around you, other villagers shift uncomfortably, but no one dares leave. Absence could be interpreted as guilt, complicity, or worse. When Tituba is finally brought forward for questioning, the atmosphere changes again. Her exotic appearance and foreign origins make her seem inherently suspicious to many in the crowd. But when Hathorne begins his interrogation, something unexpected happens. "The devil came to me," Tituba says quietly, her accented English carrying clearly through the silent meeting. "He bid me serve him, and I told him no at first, but he hurt me. He showed me a book with many names, and he said I must sign it or he would kill me." A collective gasp runs through the crowd. Unlike the denials of the other two women, Tituba is confessing, and her confession is about to make everything infinitely worse. Tituba's confession unleashes something terrible in the meeting house. Her words pour out like water from a broken dam, each detail more horrifying than the last. She describes a tall, dark man who appeared to her in Boston, promising wonderful things if she would serve him. She tells of flying through the air with Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne to torment the children. "There are many witches in Boston," she continues, her voice gaining strength as she speaks. "And here in Salem Village, there are others. I have seen them in the Devil's Book, names written in blood." The crowd erupts in fearful whispers. If Tituba speaks truth, then the three women before them are merely the beginning. The witchcraft contagion could spread throughout the entire village, affecting anyone, anywhere. Your mind reels as you process the implication. Yesterday, your greatest concerns were finding enough firewood and stretching your food supplies until spring. Now you're listening to testimony about devil worship and supernatural flight, about neighbors who might be secret servants of Satan. The afflicted girl's reactions to Tituba's confession are different than before. Instead of the violent fits that accompanied Sarah Good and Osborne's denials, they nod and point, confirming details of Tituba's supernatural narrative. "Yes," Abigail Williams shouts, "that is the man I saw. The dark man." Magistrate Hathorne leans forward, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a hunter who has found the scent. "Who else have you seen with the devil? Name them." The silence that follows is absolute. Even the wind outside seems to have stopped. Every person in the meeting house holds their breath, waiting to hear which of their neighbors might be named as Satan's servants. You realize that Tituba's next words could determine who lives and who dies. But Tituba hesitates, and in that pause you see something that chills you more than the February wind outside. She looks around the packed meeting house, her eyes moving from face to face among the crowd. For a brief moment, her gaze meets yours, and you see not the confident confessor of moments before, but a terrified woman who realizes she may have said too much. I cannot see the names clearly," she finally says, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The Devil's Book is hard to read, And the other witches, they hide their faces when they come to our meetings. Hathorn's expression shows clear disappointment, but he presses forward. Think carefully, woman. Lives depend upon your truthfulness. Have you seen any of these people present at the devil's gatherings? The magistrate's gesture encompasses the entire crowd, and you feel every eye in the room suddenly becoming suspicious of every other eye. The farmer standing beside you shifts uncomfortably, and you realize he's now looking at you with the same weariness you feel toward him. This is how it happens, you think with growing dread. This is how it happens, you think with growing dread. This is how a community tears itself apart, not through invasion or natural disaster, but through the slow poison of suspicion that turns neighbor against neighbor. Your stomach cramps painfully, reminding you that you haven't eaten since yesterday's thin gruel. The physical discomfort combines with the emotional terror of the examination to make you feel weak and dizzy. You need fresh air, food, warmth, the basic necessities of survival that seemed so important this morning, but now pale beside the greater threat of accusation. Outside, snow begins falling again, visible through the meeting house's small windows. The weather that could kill you with cold and starvation no longer seems like your greatest enemy. The examination finally ends, after what feels like an eternity, but the three accused women are not released. Constable Herrick announces they will be transported to Boston's jail to await formal trial. The word jail sends another wave of fear through the crowd. Everyone knows that Salem's prison is little better than a death sentence, especially in winter. As the crowd begins to disperse, you overhear fragments of whispered conversations that make your blood run cold. Did you see how Thomas Miller looked when Tituba spoke of the Devil's Book? Mary Eastie was awfully quiet during the testimony. That new family from Andover, they weren't even here today. Suspicious, if you ask me. The paranoia is already spreading, invisible but as deadly as any plague. You push through the crowd toward the doors, desperate for fresh air and distance from the madness you've just witnessed. But as you reach the exit, a hand grasps your shoulder firmly. Thomas Whitmore. The voice belongs to Ann Putnam Sr., a woman whose sharp features and sharper tongue have made her feared throughout the village. A word, if you please. Your heart pounds as you turn to face her. Ann Putnam's family has been at the center of many Salem Village disputes, and her daughter Ann Jr. is one of the afflicted children. Being singled out by her could be the beginning of your own nightmare. Goodwife Putnam, you reply, trying to keep your voice steady. I noticed you seemed very interested in Tituba's testimony, she says, her eyes narrowing, almost as if you recognize something she described. The accusation is subtle but unmistakable. You realize that even your facial expressions during the examination have been watched and judged. In Salem Village, there is no safe reaction to witnessing witchcraft testimony. I fear I don't understand your meaning. Goodwife Putnam, you reply, though you understand perfectly. Every word you speak now could be used against you later, twisted into evidence of guilt or complicity. Her thin lips curve into what might be called a smile, but contains no warmth. When Tituba spoke of the tall, dark man who comes to witches in the night, I saw recognition in your eyes. Have you perhaps encountered such a figure? The question is a trap, and you know. Answer yes, and you admit to supernatural experiences that could brand you as a witch. Answer no too quickly or firmly, and she might claim you're lying to hide your guilt. I have had no commerce with any evil spirits, you say carefully. The devil's work frightens me as much as any God-fearing man. She studies your face with the intensity of a hawk, examining a mouse. Yet your cow stopped giving milk recently, did it not? And your crops failed last autumn despite adequate rain. Some might say those are signs of God's disfavor. Your mouth goes dry. She's right about both things, but they have natural explanations. Your cow is old, and you planted too late after injuring your back. Yet in the current atmosphere, natural explanations carry little weight against supernatural suspicions. Hard times come to all farmers, you manage to say. Indeed they do, but they come most often to those who have strayed from righteousness.
She adjusts her woolen cloak against the cold wind that blows through the opening doors. I trust we'll see you at the next Sabbath service, Thomas. Regular worship is so important for keeping the devil at bay. The thread in her words is clear. Be visible, be present, be above suspicion, or face the consequences. You escape Ann Putnam's scrutiny and step into the bitter February afternoon. But the cold wind feels like a relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside the meeting house. The snow that began falling during the examination now comes down steadily, adding to the already knee-deep drifts that make walking treacherous. The journey back to your cabin takes twice as long as the morning trip. Your leather boots, already cracked from winter's abuse, now let in melted snow with every step. By the time you reach your door, your feet are numb and your woolen stockings are soaked through. Inside, you discover disaster.
While you attended the examination, your fire died completely, and the cold has invaded every corner of your small cabin. The thin porridge you abandoned this morning has frozen solid in the iron pot. Your water bucket shows a skin of ice, and frost covers the inside of your single window. Rebuilding the fire becomes an urgent necessity. Your hands shake so badly from cold that it takes nearly 10 minutes to strike a successful spark. The precious tinder catches finally, but you realize with growing alarm that you've used another day's worth of firewood just to restore basic survival conditions. As you hold your hands over the struggling flames, warming returns to your fingers along with the memory of what you witnessed today. The accusations, the confessions, and Putnam's veiled threats, they all swirl in your mind like the snow swirling outside your window. You calculate your remaining resources with new urgency. Food for perhaps 8 more days. Firewood for maybe 4 if you're extremely careful. But now you face another calculation entirely. How long can you survive in Salem Village before suspicion falls on you? The fire crackles weakly, providing little warmth against either the February cold or the chill of fear. The afternoon passes in a haze of necessary survival tasks. You chip ice from your water bucket and melt it slowly over the fire, rationing your movements to preserve both warmth and energy. Your stomach growls constantly, but you force yourself to wait until evening before preparing another meal, a handful of dried beans and thin broth. As darkness falls, you hear sounds outside that make you freeze in place. Footsteps crunching through snow, multiple people moving carefully but not quietly enough. Voices speaking in low, urgent tones. You blow out your single candle and move to the window, peering through the frost-covered glass. 3 figures stand near the edge of your property, barely visible in the falling snow. You recognize one as Ezra Cheever, the court recorder who was present at today's examination. The other 2 are less familiar, but their official bearing and the way they examine your cabin suggests they're not casual visitors. Your blood turns to ice as you realize they're studying your property for signs of witchcraft. The strange circular pattern in your vegetable garden, created by your cow walking in a circle while tethered, could be interpreted as a ritual circle. The dead tree struck by lightning last summer might seem like evidence of supernatural activity. Even your modest success at herb growing could be twisted into proof of magical knowledge. You remain perfectly still, barely breathing as the men complete their examination. After what feels like hours but is probably only minutes, they move away into the night. Their visit confirms your worst fears. You're already under suspicion. Sleep becomes impossible. You sit by your small fire, rationing your remaining wood and considering your options. You could flee Salem Village, but travel in winter often means death, and running away would certainly be seen as an admission of guilt. You're trapped between the cold that could kill you and the accusations that certainly will. Dawn breaks gray and cold, revealing a world transformed by the night's heavy snowfall. The drifts now reach your cabin's windowsill, and you realize with growing despair that you're effectively trapped. Even if you wanted to flee Salem Village, The deep snow makes travel nearly impossible. Your morning routine has become a careful balance of survival necessities. The fire requires immediate attention, 2 precious logs to drive away the killing cold. Your water supply needs replenishing, but the nearest well is now buried under snow that would take hours to dig through. Instead, you fill your iron pot with clean snow and melt it over the fire. The process is slow and wasteful of fuel, but necessary. As the snow melts, you add your morning meal, a small handful of dried corn, and the smallest possible portion of salt pork. The resulting gruel is thin and unsatisfying, but it's all you can afford. While you eat, you hear the distant sound of horses and voices coming from the direction of Salem town. More officials, you assume, arriving to investigate yesterday's revelations. The sound fills you with dread because it means the witchcraft crisis is escalating beyond Salem Village. Through your frost-covered window, you watch smoke rising from chimneys throughout the village. Each column of smoke represents another family struggling with the same basic survival challenges you face. But now everyone must also contend with the additional burden of mutual suspicion. Your neighbor Goodman Fletcher's chimney shows no smoke at all. You remember he was one of the men who looked at you strangely during yesterday's examination. Is he conserving firewood like you, or has something more sinister befallen him? The thought makes you realize that in Salem Village, even the absence of smoke from a neighbor's chimney can become grounds for suspicion. The sound of horses grows closer, and you can now distinguish individual voices, at least 4 men, possibly more, discussing something with the urgency that accompanies official business. You dress quickly in your heaviest clothing and prepare for another potential visit from the authorities. A sharp knock at your door confirms your fears. Thomas Whitmore open, by order of the magistrates. This time you recognize the voice of Samuel Willard, a minister from Boston who sometimes assists with examinations. His presence suggests that yesterday's revelations have attracted attention from beyond Salem Village. You lift the heavy bar from your door and find 4 men standing in the deep snow. Willard wears the black coat and white collar of his profession, but his face shows none of the kindness usually associated with ministers. Behind him stand 3 other officials, including Ezra Cheever, who was among last night's mysterious visitors. We require answers to certain questions arising from yesterday's examination, Willard says without preamble. May we? The question is purely formal. Refusing would be tantamount to a confession of guilt. You step aside and watch as the 4 men crowd into your small cabin. A presence immediately makes the space feel claustrophobic, and their official authority transforms your humble home into an interrogation chamber. Willard's eyes move quickly around the room, noting details: your meager food supplies, the carefully banked fire, the single can. You realize he's cataloging everything as potential evidence. You attended yesterday's examination of the 3 accused witches, he states. It's not a question. I, as required, you reply, trying to keep your voice steady. And you found their testimony illuminating. The question contains multiple traps, and you know that your next words could determine whether you leave this cabin as a free man or a prisoner. The testimony was disturbing, you answer carefully. To learn that the devil's influence has reached our community troubles any Christian soul. Willard nods, but his eyes remain calculating. Indeed. And yet some present seemed less surprised than others by these revelations. Some appeared almost familiar with what was described. You feel sweat gathering beneath your woolen shirt despite the cold. This is the same accusation Ann Putnam made yesterday, but coming from an official investigator, it carries far more weight. I was shocked by what I heard, you say, as any God-fearing man would be. Cheever steps forward, consulting a leather-bound book. Yet we have reports that your behavior during the examination was noteworthy. You were observed to be unusually attentive when Tituba described the devil's book. I listened carefully to all the testimony, as is proper. Willard moves closer to your fireplace, examining the arrangement of your few possessions. Tell me, Thomas Whitmore, have you experienced any unusual dreams recently? Visions, perhaps? Visitations in the night? The questions are designed to trap you. If you admit to dreams or nighttime disturbances, they could be interpreted as supernatural experiences. If you deny them too firmly, you might seem untruthful. I sleep poorly in this cold. You answer honestly. Sometimes the wind and cold make for restless night. The wind, Cheever repeats, making a note in his book. And do you ever hear voices in this wind, whispers perhaps calling you to dark deeds? Your heart pounds so loudly you fear they must hear it. Every innocent explanation for your behavior, poor sleep, worry about survival, reaction to the cold, is being twisted into potential evidence of supernatural corruption. Outside, the snow continues falling, trapping you physically just as these questions trap you verbally. The interrogation continues as Willard examines your few possessions with the thoroughness of a man searching for evidence of the devil's work. He picks up your small collection of dried herbs, chamomile, and willow bark you gathered last summer for treating winter aches, and holds them to the light as if they might reveal supernatural secrets. These herbs, he says, his voice heavy with implication. From where did you learn their properties? My mother taught me, you answer truthfully. She learned from her mother before her, common knowledge for treating winter ailments. And have you ever used these herbs to influence others, to cause harm or healing beyond natural means? The question terrifies you because any answer could be twisted. If you admit to successful healing, they might claim supernatural aid. If you mention failures, they might suggest you chose not to help, indicating malicious intent. I have made teas for my own winter cough, you say carefully. Nothing more. Cheever makes another note, his quill scratching ominously in the quiet cabin. The sound reminds you of rats in the walls, persistent, destructive, impossible to stop. We have reports, Willard continues, that you were seen gathering these herbs by moonlight last summer. Why would an innocent man need to work by darkness? Your heart sinks. Someone has been watching you for months, cataloging your most mundane activities for later use as evidence. The moonlight gathering was simple practicality. Summer days were needed for more demanding farm work, and the cool night air preserved the herbs' potency better. The herbs maintain their strength when picked in cool air, you explain, and my days were occupied with necessary labor. Or perhaps, Willard suggests, you worked by darkness to hide your true purposes from godly neighbors. The officials spend nearly 2 hours in your cabin, examining every corner, questioning every possession, turning your simple survival tools into potential evidence of witchcraft. Your axe becomes a weapon for ritual purposes. Your careful food storage suggests unnatural knowledge of preserving provisions. Even your Bible, though present and obviously used, draws scrutiny. The pages are well worn, Willard observes, flipping through your most treasured possession. Yet certain passages appear untouched. The sections concerning the punishment of witches seem remarkably clean. You want to explain that you avoid those passages because they terrify you, but such an admission might be interpreted as guilt. Instead, you remain silent, watching your interrogators build a case from shadows and suppositions. When they finally prepare to leave, Willard delivers what feels like a death sentence disguised as advice. Thomas Whitmore, I strongly suggest you examine your soul for any stain of corruption. The devil's servants often hide their true nature even from themselves. Pray earnestly, attend every service, and avoid any behavior that might draw suspicion. And Cheever adds, closing his leather book with a snap that sounds like a trap shutting, remain available for further questioning. Do not attempt to leave Salem Village without official permission. After they depart, you sit by your dwindling fire and realize your situation has become desperate. You're now under official suspicion, marked for continued surveillance, and trapped by both winter weather and legal decree. The 4 walls of your cabin, which provided shelter against the brutal cold, now feel like a prison. Outside, the snow continues falling, adding to the drifts that make travel impossible. You count your remaining firewood,
Perhaps 3 days if you're extremely careful. Your food supplies might last a week. But your greatest concern is no longer freezing or starving. The days following the interrogation blur together in a haze of careful survival and mounting paranoia. You ration your firewood down to single logs, burning them only when the cold becomes life-threatening. Your food supplies dwindle to a handful of dried beans and turnips, so soft they barely hold their shape. But physical deprivation pales beside the psychological torture of constant surveillance. You see figures moving past your cabin at odd hours, sometimes real, sometimes imagined. The crunch of footsteps in snow outside your door comes at all hours. But when you peer through your frosted window, you see nothing but swirling white darkness. Sleep becomes impossible. Every sound might herald another official visit or, worse, midnight arrest. You've heard stories from other villages of accused witches dragged from their beds in chains, transported to Boston's jail where many die before trial from cold, disease, or despair. Your nearest neighbor, Goodman Fletcher, has stopped showing any signs of activity. No smoke rises from his chimney. No footprints mark the snow around his cabin. You suspect he's either dead from cold or fled Salem Village under cover of darkness. Either possibility terrifies you. Death from exposure or life as a fugitive seem equally likely outcomes for anyone touched by suspicion. The isolation grows more complete each day. No one visits, no one calls out greetings when you venture outside for necessary tasks. You've become invisible to your community, which in Salem Village often precedes becoming accused by it. On the 5th day after the interrogation, you make a desperate decision. Your supplies won't last another week, and remaining in your cabin feels increasingly like waiting for death or arrest. You must find food and information about what's happening in the village, even if it means exposing yourself to additional scrutiny. You venture out into the bitter morning air, your breath forming thick clouds that immediately freeze on your beard. The snow has finally stopped falling, but it lies 4 feet deep in places, making each step a monumental effort. Your leather boots, cracked beyond repair, let in moisture that turns your feet numb within minutes. The village appears almost deserted.
A few thin columns of smoke rise from chimneys, but you see no people moving about their normal business. Even the livestock seem hidden away. No cattle visible in the few barns you can see. No chickens scratching in the snow. The silence feels unnatural, oppressive, as if Salem Village holds its breath in terror. Your destination is Samuel Harper's General Store, one of the few buildings that might offer both supplies and information. Harper has always been practical rather than superstitious, more concerned with profit than prophecy. If anyone in Salem Village might still conduct normal business despite the witchcraft hysteria, it would be him. The walk that normally takes 10 minutes requires nearly an hour through the deep snow. By the time you reach Harper's store, your clothes are soaked with melted snow, and your strength is nearly exhausted. You pause outside the wooden building, gathering courage for what might be your last attempt at normal human interaction in Salem Village. Through the store's small windows, you can see Harper moving about inside, tending to his goods with the same methodical precision he's shown for years. The sight of such ordinary activity fills you with desperate hope. Perhaps somewhere in Salem Village, life continues as it should. You push open the heavy wooden door, and a bell announces your arrival. Harper looks up from his account ledger, and his expression tells you immediately that your hope was misplaced. Harper's face shows no welcome, only the careful wariness of a man who has learned to fear his own customers. He doesn't greet you or ask about your needs. Instead, he simply stares, waiting for you to explain why you've risked venturing out in this weather and climate of suspicion. "Good morning, Samuel," you say, trying to sound casual despite your circumstances. "I'm in need of some basic supplies. Cornmeal, perhaps some salt pork if you have any." "Supplies are scarce," he replies curtly, "and expensive. Winter has been hard on everyone." His tone suggests that your particular hardships don't concern him. You notice that his store, normally well stocked, appears nearly empty. The shelves that once held barrels of grain and sides of preserved meat now show only scattered remnant. Either supply lines from Salem town have failed, or Harper has hidden his goods to avoid sharing them in desperate times. I can pay, you offer, though your few coins won't stretch far. Harper studies you for a long moment, and you realize he's calculating whether serving you might bring official attention to his establishment. Finally, he moves behind his counter and retrieves a small bag of cornmeal and an even smaller piece of salt pork. This is all I can spare, he says, though you glimpsed more substantial stores in the back room. That'll be 4 shillings. The price is nearly double what such supplies would normally cost, but you have no choice. As you count out the precious coins, Harper leans closer and speaks in a whisper that barely reaches your ears. Thomas, people are talking about you. Bad talk. If I were you, I'd consider whether Salem Village is the healthiest place to spend the rest of winter. Harper's warning sends ice through your veins that has nothing to do with the February cold. What kind of talk? You whisper back, dreading the answer. Ann Putnam has been telling anyone who'll listen that you showed unnatural interest in Tutuba's confession. Says she saw recognition in your eyes when the slave talked about the devil's book. Harper glances toward his front window nervously, and Ezra Cheever's been asking questions about your herb gathering last summer, making it sound like something more than it was. Your worst fears are being realized. The careful surveillance, the twisted interpretations of innocent activities, the building case against you, it's all following the same pattern you've seen destroy other accused witches. There's more, Harper continues, his voice barely audible. They found strange marks carved in the bark of the oak tree near your property. Symbols, they're calling them, evidence of ritual markings. You know exactly what marks he means. The simple notches you carved to track the passage of days during a particularly lonely stretch last autumn. But in the current climate of hysteria, even the most mundane activities become sinister evidence. Samuel, you know me, you plead quietly. We've done business for years. Do you truly believe I'm in league with Satan? He looks at you for a long moment, and in his eyes you see something worse than accusation. You see pity. What I believe doesn't matter anymore, Thomas. What matters is what they can make others believe, and they're building a strong case. He wraps your meager purchases in brown paper with hands that tremble slightly. Take my advice. Leave Salem Village tonight while you still can. The roads are dangerous, but not as dangerous as staying. You leave Harper's store with your precious supplies and the terrible knowledge that your time in Salem Village is measured in hours, not days. The return journey through the snow feels like walking through a nightmare. Every shadow could hide an accuser. Every sound might herald your arrest. Back in your cabin, you sit before your meager fire and try to think rationally about your impossible situation. Fleeing means almost certain death from exposure. The February wilderness is unforgiving, and you have no destination where safety is guaranteed. Staying means probable arrest, imprisonment in Boston's notorious jail, and eventual execution. You unwrap Harper's supplies and prepare what might be your last meal in Salem Village. The cornmeal mixed with melted snow creates a thin gruel, and the small piece of salt pork provides the first substantial protein you've tasted in days. As you eat, you try to formulate a plan for survival. The marked tree, Harper mentioned, troubles you. Those simple notches, carved during lonely autumn evenings to track the passing days, have been transformed into evidence of devil worship. If such innocent activities can be twisted into proof of witchcraft, then no aspect of your life is safe from reinterpretation. Through your frost-covered window, you watch the short winter day fade into evening. Somewhere in Salem Village, people are discussing your fate, building accusations, perhaps preparing to act upon them. The comfortable routine of winter survival, tending the fire, rationing food, staying warm, now feels like preparing for execution. As darkness falls, you make your decision. You cannot flee into the winter wilderness and expect to survive, but you also cannot remain passive. waiting for arrest. You must take one final risk, attempt one desperate action that might save your life or at least reveal the truth about your situation. If you're going to be accused anyway, you need to understand exactly what evidence exists against you and who is building the case. The only way to learn this is to spy on your accusers, a dangerous gambit that could either provide crucial information or seal your fate. You wait until full darkness cloaks Salem Village before venturing out. The snow crunches softly under your feet as you make your way toward the Putnam house, where you suspect much of the plotting against you originates. Anne Putnam Sr. has already confronted you once, and her daughter is among the afflicted children whose visions have condemned others. The Putnam house glows with warm lamplight, and voices carry through the winter air. You approach carefully, staying in the shadows of the bare oak trees that surround their property. Through a partially frosted window, you can see several figures gathered around their fireplace. Anne Putnam Sr., her husband Thomas, and two other men you recognize as church officials. Your heart pounds as you creep closer, desperate to hear their conversation. The risk is enormous. Being caught eavesdropping on such a gathering would be interpreted as proof of supernatural spying abilities, evidence that you use witchcraft to gather information about your enemy. But as their words become clearer, you realize the full scope of the conspiracy against you. They're not just discussing your case, they're planning it, deciding which witnesses to call, which evidence to present, even which specific accusations will be most convincing to the magistrate. The herb gathering by moonlight should be sufficient, Thomas Putnam says, his voice carrying clearly through the cold air, combined with the strange marks on the tree and his unusual behavior during the examination. The conversation inside the Putnam house reveals the methodical construction of your destruction. Anne Putnam Sr.'s voice joins her husband's, adding details that make your blood freeze. Young Anne saw him in her visions last night, she says, referring to her afflicted daughter. He appeared as a dark specter, threatening to choke her if she revealed his secrets. She is prepared to testify about his supernatural torment. You realize with growing horror that the child's nightmares, perhaps caused by the hysteria surrounding the trials, are being transformed into evidence of your guilt. There's no defense against spectral evidence, no way to prove you weren't present as an invisible spirit tormenting sleeping children. One of the church officials, whom you now recognize as Deacon Ingersoll, speaks with the authority of religious conviction. The pattern is clear. The failed crops, the marked tree, the midnight herb gathering, it all points to someone who has made covenant with dark forces. And, Thomas Putnam adds with satisfaction, we have witnesses who can testify to his strange behavior during Tituba's confession. Several people noted his unnatural interest in her descriptions of the devil's book. The fourth figure, previously silent, finally speaks, and his voice makes you want to flee immediately. It's Jonathan Corwin, one of the magistrates who conducted the first examinations, a man with the power to order your arrest and trial. The evidence seems substantial, Corwin says thoughtfully. I believe we have sufficient cause to proceed with formal accusation. The warrants can be prepared tomorrow. You've heard enough. These four people, neighbors you've known for years, officials you've trusted with community leadership, are calmly planning your death. Their conspiracy is complete, their evidence fabricated, their decision final. You begin backing away from the window, desperate to escape before discovery, but your foot breaks through the snow crust with a loud crack. The sound of breaking snow crust echoes like thunder in the winter stillness. Inside the house, the conversation stops abruptly, replaced by the scraping of chairs and urgent whispers. You hear Thomas Putnam's voice. What was that? Check the windows. Panic floods your system as you realize discovery is imminent. You abandon stealth and run, your feet sinking deep into the snow with each desperate step. Behind you, the Putnam house door opens, spilling yellow light across the white landscape. Voices call out, and you hear the word specter shouted into the night. Your flight through the snow is a nightmare of exhaustion and terror.
The deep drifts grab at your legs like clutching hands, and your waterlogged boots make each step a monumental effort. Your breath comes in ragged gasps that form clouds of vapor, marking your passage for any pursuer. You reach your cabin and slam the door, immediately barring it with trembling hands. Through your window, you see lights moving in the distance, lanterns carried by men searching for the source of the disturbance.
And find your footprints leading directly to your door, providing physical evidence that you were spying on their gathering. The situation has moved beyond dangerous into fatal. You are no longer merely suspected of witchcraft. You're now guilty of supernatural espionage, using dark powers to spy on godly citizens. The broken snow, the footprints, the timing, it all provides perfect evidence for the story they want to tell. You sink into your chair by the dying fire, your wet clothing steaming in the small warmth. Outside, the search continues, and you know that by morning, warrants will be prepared for your arrest. The eavesdropping that you hoped would provide crucial information has instead sealed your doom. Your time as a free man is measured in hours. The searchers spend most of the night examining the area around the Putnam house, following your footprints through the snow like hounds on a scent. You watch their lantern lights move in patterns that gradually lead toward your cabin, and you know that discovery is inevitable. As dawn breaks gray and cold, you see them approaching, Constable Herrick leading a group of 4 men, their faces grim with official purpose. Behind them walks Ann Putnam Jr., the afflicted child whose visions have condemned so many others. Her presence means they intend to use her supernatural testimony to confirm your guilt. The knock on your door comes with the force of authority and the weight of doom. Thomas Whitmore, by order of the magistrates, open this door. You consider refusing, barricading yourself inside, forcing them to break down the door. But such resistance would only provide additional evidence of guilt. Instead, you lift the bar and face your fate with what dignity you can muster. Constable Herrick holds an official warrant bearing seals and signatures. Thomas Whitmore, you are accused of practicing witchcraft, of afflicting young Ann Putnam Jr. through spectral torment, and of using supernatural powers to spy upon godly citizens. You will come with us immediately to face examination. The charges are exactly what you expected, but hearing them spoken aloud still sends shock through your system. Behind Herrick, you see Ann Putnam Jr. begin to writhe and scream, pointing at you with a trembling finger. There he is, she shrieks. The dark man who comes to torment me. See how his specter reaches for me even now. Your neighbors, men you've known for years, step back in fear. In revulsion in their eyes, you see not the Thomas Whitmore they've worked alongside, but a servant of Satan whose very presence corrupts the air. They bind your hands with rough rope that cuts into your wrists, treating you not as a neighbor facing questions, but as a dangerous criminal who might use supernatural powers to escape. The constable produces heavy iron shackles that clamp around your ankles with a sound like death knells. The walk to the meeting house becomes a parade of shame and terror. Word of your arrest has spread through Salem Village like wildfire, and people emerge from their cabins to witness your downfall. Some stare in horrified fascination. Others make signs against evil, and a few call out accusations of their own. He killed my chickens with his evil eye, shouts Goodwife Bishop from her doorway. He cursed my well. Each accusation adds weight to the case against you, creating a snowball effect of blame and supernatural attribution. Every misfortune that has befallen Salem Village is now being laid at your feet, transformed from natural hardship into evidence of diabolic conspiracy. Ann Putnam Jr. continues her performance throughout the journey, stumbling and crying out whenever you're near her. Her fits have become more elaborate, more convincing, and the effect on the gathered crowd is electric. Even people who've known you since childhood now look at you with fear and revulsion. Outside the meeting house, you face the same magistrates who examined Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba just days ago. But now you're the one sitting in the accused chair, feeling the weight of dozens of hostile stares, listening to charges that will almost certainly result in your death. Magistrate Haythorne rises with the same predatory authority you remember from the previous examination. His black coat makes him appear like a great bird of prey preparing to feed, and his first words confirm that your fate is already decided. Thomas Whitmore, you stand accused of the detestable art of witchcraft. Your examination begins with the same methodical destruction of character you witnessed just days ago. Haythorne's questions are designed not to discover truth, but to confirm predetermined guilt, and every answer you give becomes twisted into evidence against you. Thomas Whitmore, how do you explain your presence outside the Putnam house last night, spying upon godly citizens? I was not spying, you protest. I was merely using supernatural powers to gather intelligence about your enemies. Haythorne interrupts. The evidence suggests otherwise. Witnesses saw you appear and disappear like a specter, leaving only footprints to mark your supernatural passage. The twisted logic makes your head spin. Your physical presence proven by the footprints is being used as evidence of supernatural ability. There's no defense against such reasoning. Visible evidence proves guilt, invisible evidence proves guilt, and any protest proves guilt. Ann Putnam Jr. suddenly screams and falls from her chair, writhing on the meeting house floor in apparent agony. He torments me, she shrieks. His specter pinches and chokes me even as he sits there. The crowd gasps in horror as they watch the child's performance. Her fits have become more sophisticated, more convincing than those you witnessed during the first examination. She points at you with a trembling finger, her young face contorted in apparent pain. Look how he stares at her, someone calls from the crowd. See how his evil eye controls her torment. You realize that any expression on your face will be interpreted as evidence. Looking concerned proves you're enjoying her suffering. Looking away proves you're hiding your guilt. Remaining expressionless proves you're coldly calculating your supernatural attack. The web of accusation and impossible logic tightens around you with each passing moment, and you begin to understand why so many of the accused have simply confessed. The examination continues for hours, with witness after witness coming forward to testify against you. Goodwife Bishop claims you cursed her chickens. Samuel Brooks swears he saw strange lights near your cabin. Even Harper, the storekeeper who warned you to flee, now reluctantly admits to noticing your unusual interest in certain herbs and your secretive behavior during recent visits. Each testimony builds upon the others, creating a narrative of supernatural malevolence that spans months of supposedly innocent activities. Your careful herb gathering becomes evidence of potion making. Your night walks taken to check your small garden or gather firewood become Sabbath meeting. Your very survival through the harsh winter is presented as proof of unnatural aid. No ordinary man could have endured this winter's hardships as he has, Thomas Putnam testifies with conviction. His continued health while others sicken and die proves he receives sustenance from dark sources. The accusation hits you like a physical blow. Your determination to survive, your careful rationing and resourcefulness, the very qualities that kept you alive through the brutal winter, all are now twisted into evidence of diabolic calm. In Salem Village, even successful survival has become supernatural. Ann Putnam Jr.'s fits intensify whenever you attempt to speak in your own defense. Her screams drown out your protests, and the crowd's increasing agitation makes rational discussion impossible. The magistrates make no effort to control the situation. Indeed, they seem to encourage the chaos as proof of your supernatural influence. Look how the afflicted child suffers when he attempts deception, Haythorne declares. Even his false words torment her spirit. You realize that confession may be your only escape from this nightmare. Several of the accused have saved their lives by admitting guilt and naming other witches, but confession would require you to destroy innocent neighbors just as these witnesses are destroying you. As evening approaches, your strength finally breaks under the relentless assault of twisted logic and false testimony. The realization that every aspect of your life has been cataloged, interpreted, and weaponized against you creates a despair deeper than any winter cold you've endured. Stop, you whisper, and the word carries through the suddenly quiet meeting house like a confession. Hathorne leans forward eagerly. You wish to speak truth at last? The weight of expectation presses down on you from every corner of the crowded building. You see faces you've known for years, neighbors who shared meals, worked alongside you during harvest, borrowed tools when theirs broke. Now they stare at you with the mixture of fear and fascination reserved for monsters. You begin. Ben's confession will save your life, but damn innocent neighbors. Denial will preserve your integrity, but guarantee your death. In Salem Village, 1692, there are no choices that don't destroy someone. Ann Putnam Jr. suddenly goes rigid, her eyes rolling back to show only white. When she speaks, her voice carries an unnatural authority that silences even the magistrates. He speaks with the devil's tongue, she declares. I see the dark man whispering in his ear, telling him what words to say. The crowd erupts in terrified whispers and prayers. Several people flee the meeting house entirely, unwilling to remain in the presence of such supernatural activity. Others press closer, morbidly fascinated by witnessing actual communion between an accused witch and Satan himself. You realize that even silence has become evidence against you. Any pause in your responses is interpreted as consultation with dark forces. Any hesitation is proof of supernatural guidance. The trap is complete, and there is no escape except through the destruction of others. The examination finally ends as darkness falls, but you are not released. Constable Herrick announces that you will be held in Salem Village's temporary jail, a converted root cellar beneath the meeting house, until transport to Boston can be arranged. The prospect of spending even one night in such conditions fills you with dread. Or drag you down rough wooden steps into an underground chamber that feels like a tomb. The cellar is perhaps 8 feet square, with a dirt floor that seeps moisture from the frozen ground above. A single oil lamp provides flickering light that throws grotesque shadows on the stone wall. You're not alone. 3 other prisoners huddle in the corners. Sarah Good, looking even more haggard than during her examination, and 2 men you don't recognize. The stench of unwashed bodies, human waste, and fear creates an atmosphere more oppressive than the February cold above ground. Welcome to hell, Sarah Good whispers as the constable locks the iron-barred door. Though I reckon it's warmer down here than up there. Your shackles make movement difficult, and you realize that lying down is impossible. The chains are designed to force prisoners to remain upright, preventing rest and accelerating the physical breakdown that makes confession seem preferable to continued suffering. The temperature in the cellar is barely above freezing, cold enough to cause constant shivering, but not quite cold enough for immediate death. Water drips steadily from the ceiling, creating puddles in the dirt floor that turn to ice overnight. Your breath forms clouds in the stagnant air. Above you hear the normal sounds of evening, people returning to their homes, securing their properties for the night, banking fires for warmth. The ordinary life of Salem Village continues while you sit in this underground pit, waiting for either confession, death, or the slim possibility of rescue. Your first night in the underground jail stretches endlessly, measured by the steady drip of water and the constant ache of forced standing. Sleep becomes impossible. Whenever exhaustion makes you sag against your chains, the iron cuts into your wrists and ankles, jerking you back to painful consciousness. Sarah Good shares fragments of information about what's happening above ground. More arrests every day, she whispers. The afflicted children see witches everywhere now. Rebecca Nurse was taken yesterday. Rebecca Nurse, if they'll accuse her, they'll accuse anyone. The news horrifies you. Rebecca Nurse is one of Salem Village's most respected citizens, known for her piety and kindness to all. If the hysteria has progressed to accusing someone of her standing, then no one in the community is safe. They say Boston jail is even worse than this. One of the other prisoners adds, his name is John, and he's been here 3 days already. Stone walls, no light at all, and so cold that men die in their sleep. The prospect of transport to Boston becomes another layer of terror.
At least here in Salem Village, you're close to familiar surroundings. In Boston, you'll be completely isolated, surrounded by strangers who see you only as a condemned witch awaiting execution. As dawn light filters through the small barred window near the ceiling, you hear activity above. Horses arriving, official voices, the sound of preparation for departure. Your time in Salem Village's makeshift jail is ending, and the next stage of your nightmare is about to begin. Constable Herrick's boots echo on the wooden steps as he descends to collect his prisoners. Transport to Boston leaves within the hour. He announced anyone who wishes to confess and save the colony the expense of further imprisonment may speak now. Espaso. The offer to confess hangs in the stagnant air of the underground cell like a lifeline extended over a bottomless pit. You know that confession means survival. Many of the accused who admitted guilt have been spared execution, kept alive to testify against others, but it also means becoming part of the machine that destroys innocent neighbors. Sarah Good breaks first. I confess, she whispers, her voice barely audible. I made covenant with the devil, and I afflicted the children as charged. Herrick nods approvingly and makes a note in his ledger. Sarah's chains remain, but you sense that her death sentence has just been commuted to indefinite imprisonment. A living hell, but still life. The other prisoners watch in silence as each must make the same impossible choice. John holds out for several minutes, his breath forming clouds in the cold air as he wrestles with his decision. Finally, he too confesses. Now all eyes turn to you. The weight of their expectation is crushing. Confess and live as a destroyer of innocence, or maintain your integrity and face certain death.
The choice that seemed impossible above ground feels equally impossible in this underground hell. Thomas Whitmore, Herrick says, his voice echoing off the stone walls. What say you? Will you confess your crimes and seek God's mercy? You close your eyes and think of the life you lived above ground. The simple struggle for survival, the satisfaction of a successful harvest, the quiet evenings by your fire reading scripture. All of it is gone now, transformed by fear and hysteria into evidence of supernatural evil. When you open your eyes, you see not salvation and confession, but the faces of innocent neighbors who will be destroyed if you speak their names. Rebecca Nurse, Martha Corey, John Proctor, good people whose only crime is existing in a community gone mad with I will not confess to crimes I have not committed. You say, your voice stronger than you expected. I will not purchase my life with the blood of innocent neighbors. The words hang in the cold air of the underground cell like a death sentence pronounced upon yourself. Herrick's face shows no surprise. He's heard such declarations before, and he knows how they always end. So be it, he says, making a final note in his ledger. Transport to Boston proceeds as planned. May God have mercy on your soul, Thomas Whitmore, for the court will have none. They drag you up the wooden steps into the gray February morning, where a horse-drawn cart waits with iron-barred sides like a mobile prison. The other prisoners who confessed are loaded into a separate, less secure wagon. Their admission of guilt has earned them slightly better treatment, though they still face indefinite imprisonment. As the cart begins moving through Salem Village, you catch glimpses of familiar places through the iron bars. Your abandoned cabin, already showing signs of neglect and scavenging. Harper's store, shuttered and empty. The meeting house where this nightmare began with Tituba's confession. The villagers who emerge to watch your departure show a mixture of relief and uncertainty. You represent the devil's influence being removed from their community, but your steadfast denial of guilt creates doubt about the entire proceeding. If Thomas Whitmore, a man they've known for years, can be accused and convicted of impossible crimes, what does that say about the safety of any citizen? The cart wheels crunch through snow and frozen mud as Salem Village disappears behind you.
The February wilderness ahead looks as hostile and unforgiving as the human community you're leaving behind. Boston's jail awaits, with conditions that make Salem's underground cell seem comfortable. The journey to Boston takes 2 days through February's harsh wilderness, and each mile brings new suffering. The iron-barred cart offers no protection from wind, snow, or the bone-deep cold that penetrates your inadequate clothing. Your chains prevent you from moving enough to generate warmth, and frostbite begins claiming your fingers and toes. The other prisoners in the cart, those who maintained their innocence like you, suffer equally. An elderly woman named Martha succumbs to the cold during the first night, her body rigid with frost by morning. The guards simply leave her corpse in the cart, a grim reminder of what awaits those who refuse to confess. Boston's jail, when you finally reach it, exceeds every nightmare you've imagined. The stone building rises like a fortress of despair, its small windows barred with iron and its walls stained with moisture and human misery. The stench becomes overwhelming as you approach. Unwashed bodies, human waste, disease, and death create an atmosphere that makes breathing itself an ordeal. Inside, the conditions defy comprehension. Dozens of prisoners are crowded into cells designed for far fewer, creating a hell of competing survival needs. Food consists of watery gruel served once daily, if at all. Water is scarce, often frozen, and frequently contaminated with filth. Your cell holds 12 other accused witches, including some you recognize from neighboring communities. They huddle together for warmth, sharing body heat, and whispered prayers that provide the only comfort available in this place of institutional cruelty. "Welcome to the Devil's Kingdom," whispers an old man who's been here since autumn. Though I begin to wonder if it's the devil or the magistrates who truly rule this place. The comment carries a dangerous truth that no one dares speak aloud. The conditions here are so inhumane that they seem designed more for torture than justice. Weeks pass in Boston jail, and you lose track of time in the perpetual gray twilight of the stone cell. Days blend into nights without distinction, marked only by the irregular arrival of thin gruel and the gradual weakening of your fellow prisoners. Each morning brings the discovery of new deaths, people who simply couldn't endure another day of cold, hunger, and Your body adapts to survival in ways you never imagined possible. You learn to sleep standing up, pressed against other prisoners for warmth. You discover how to make a handful of watery gruel last for hours, savoring each grain of corn like precious treasure. Most importantly, you develop the mental discipline to preserve your sanity in conditions designed to break the human spirit. The other prisoners become your unwitting teachers in institutional survival.
An accused witch named Elizabeth shows you how to exercise within the confines of your chains, preventing muscle deterioration that leads to death. A Puritan minister named George, imprisoned for defending the accused, teaches Latin prayers that provide mental escape from physical suffering. The body can endure what the mind accepts, he whispers during one particularly brutal night when the temperature drops below freezing inside the stone walls. But the soul must remain free, regardless of what they do to the flesh. Outside your barred window, you occasionally glimpse Boston's daily life continuing normally. People walk freely through streets, conduct business, return to warm homes and adequate meals. The contrast between their liberty and your imprisonment becomes another form of torture, the constant reminder of everything you've lost. News from Salem Village arrives sporadically through new prisoners. The hysteria continues spreading, with accusations now reaching beyond Massachusetts and the neighboring colonies. What began as a local crisis has become a regional catastrophe, consuming innocent lives with increasing hunger. Spring arrives outside Boston jail, but inside the stone walls, seasons matter little except for slight changes in temperature and the increasing stench as warmer weather brings new challenges. What you don't expect is the news that arrives with a group of newly arrested prisoners from Salem Village in April. The governor's wife has been accused, whispers a man named Samuel who was arrested just days ago. Lady Fitz herself stands charged with witchcraft, and Cotton Mather is having doubts about spectral evidence. The news sends shock through the overcrowded cell. If the Colonial governor's wife can be accused, if prominent ministers are questioning the trial's methods, then perhaps the madness has finally reached its natural limit. Even mass hysteria must eventually exhaust itself when it begins consuming those in power. More significant news follows. Several prominent Boston merchants have been accused, and their wealthy families are pressuring the governor to reconsider the court's method. Money and political influence, it seems, carry weight that truth and innocence could not. They say the court of Oyer and Terminer may be dissolved, Samuel continues.
Too many important people are being touched by accusations. You feel something you haven't experienced in months. Hope, not the hope of immediate release, but the possibility that this nightmare might have an ending, other than death. If the trials are indeed winding down, if reason is returning to Massachusetts, then survival in this hellish place might actually lead to eventual. The irony isn't lost on you. What began as an attack on society's outcasts and vulnerable members has finally threatened the powerful enough to provoke reform. The system that condemned poor Sarah Good for Antitruba has finally moved against the colonial elite, and only then does justice become possible. You begin to believe that you might live to see another winter.
In May 1693, your hope is finally rewarded with the most beautiful sound you've ever heard. The turning of keys in cell locks and the voice of a Boston official announcing general pardons for those who have not yet faced trial. The court of Oyer and Terminer has been dissolved, spectral evidence declared inadmissible, and hundreds of prisoners are being released. You step outside Boston jail for the first time in over a year, blinking in spring sunlight that seems impossibly bright. After months of stone-walled twilight, your body has been transformed by imprisonment. You're gaunt, weakened, bearing scars from chains and deprivation that will never fully heal. But you're alive, which is more than 20 of the condemned could say. The Boston streets teem with activity that seems alien after institutional silence. Normal people conducting normal business, children playing, merchants calling their wares. The simple freedom of movement and choice feels miraculous after so long in captivity. Your first meal as a free man, bread and ale purchased with coins given by a charitable organization, tastes better than any feast you remember from your previous life. Each bite represents not just nutrition, but the fundamental human right to feed yourself, to make choices about your own survival. The journey back to Salem Village takes 2 days, but this time you walk as a free man rather than ride as a prisoner. The spring landscape shows nature's recovery from winter's harshness, green shoots pushing through thawed earth, birds returning from southern migrations, streams running free of ice. The renewal offers hope that human communities might also recover from this seasonal madness. But as you approach Salem Village, you wonder what kind of home awaits a man who survived accusations of witchcraft. Innocence may have been legally established, but social suspicion often outlasts official exoneration. Salem Village has changed during your imprisonment, and not in ways that suggest healing from its recent madness. Many houses stand empty, their owners having fled during the height of accusations or died in jail awaiting trial. The community that once seemed too small for privacy now feels hollow, depleted by paranoia and loss. Your own cabin shows the effects of abandonment and scavenging. The roof has developed leaks, winter's ice has cracked the stone foundation, and neighbors have clearly helped themselves to anything useful you left behind. The garden where you once grew herbs, the same herbs that became evidence of witchcraft, is overgrown with weeds and wild growth. Some of your former neighbors greet your return with awkward silence, while others offer cautious welcomes that barely conceal their lingering uncertainty. The accusations may have been dismissed by courts, but in the minds of people who witnessed your arrest and heard testimony about your supernatural activities, doubt remains. Thomas Samuel Harper says when you visit his rope and store, good to see. His tone suggests that your survival itself might be evidence of unnatural aid. In Salem Village, even legal vindication cannot fully restore social trust. The new minister, Reverend Paris, fled during the trial's aftermath, preaches reconciliation and healing, but his sermons to half-empty pews suggest that Salem Village's wounds run deeper than spiritual guidance can reach. Too many families have been destroyed, too many friendships shattered by accusations and betrayals. You begin rebuilding your life with the practical necessities of survival that defined your existence before the nightmare began. Repairing your cabin, planting new crops, gathering firewood for the coming winter. But now these simple activities carry the weight of knowledge about how quickly normal life can transform into something deadly and impossible. The herbs you once gathered for winter remedies remain untouched in the forest. As autumn approaches Salem Village in 1693, you've managed to restore some semblance of normal life. Normalcy itself has been forever changed by what you've experienced. Your crops are modest but sufficient. Your cabin is weatherproof again, and your relationships with neighbors have settled into a careful politeness that acknowledges shared survival of community madness. Physical scars from chains and imprisonment have mostly healed, but the psychological marks run deeper. You no longer sleep easily, starting awake at every sound that might signal another midnight arrest. Simple activities like herb gathering or reading scripture carry new awareness of how innocent behaviors can be twisted into evidence of guilt.
Other survivors of the trials cope differently. Some have left Massachusetts entirely, seeking fresh starts in communities untouched by witchcraft hysteria. Others have thrown themselves into religious fervor, as if excessive piety might serve as armor against future accusations. A few, like yourself, simply continue the quiet work of daily survival, carrying their knowledge like a burden. The approaching winter brings familiar challenges: gathering firewood, preserving food, preparing for months of cold and isolation. But now these preparations carry additional weight: the understanding that survival depends not just on practical preparation, but on maintaining the delicate social connections that make community life possible. You've learned that in times of crisis, neighbors can become accusers, authority can become tyranny, and innocence provides no protection against collective fear. These lessons burned into your memory by sufferings will shape every winter for the rest of your life. As the first snow begins to fall outside your repaired cabin, you sit by your carefully tended fire and remember those who didn't survive Salem Village's encounter with mass hysteria. Their deaths serve as permanent reminders of how quickly civilization can collapse into something unrecognizable. Years pass and you grow old in Salem Village, carrying the weight of what you witnessed and survived. The community gradually heals from its self-inflicted wounds, though some scars never fully fade. New families arrive, children are born who know the witch trials only as stories told by their elders, and life slowly returns to the rhythm of seasons and harvests. But you remember,
in the dark hours before dawn, when sleep eludes you and the fire burns low, you remember Sarah Good dying in prison, Giles Corey crushed beneath stones for refusing to confess to impossible crimes, and the dozens of innocent people whose deaths served only to feed the hunger of mass hysteria. You've become something of a living reminder to Salem Village, proof that someone can survive false accusation and imprisonment, but also evidence of how close the community came to complete self-destruction. Young people sometimes seek you out, asking what it was like during the Troubles, and you tell them what you can bear to remember. Fear is a poison, you tell them by your fireside on winter evenings. It makes good people do evil things, and evil things seem good. When fear rules a community, truth becomes whatever people need it to be, and innocence becomes whatever threatens their safety. The lessons you share are simple but hard-won. Question authority when it demands you betray your neighbor. Resist the comfort of finding someone to blame for your troubles. Remember that the vulnerable and different are often the first targets when communities seek scapegoats for their problems. As you prepare for your final winter, you know that your greatest victory was not surviving Salem's madness, but maintaining your integrity through it. You refuse to purchase life with innocent blood, and that choice, more than mere survival, defines the man you became. The herbs you once feared to gather now fill your shelves again, healing rather than harming.